You may have seen the Goodlatte Amendment trending on news and in social media, Twitter and Facebook, in regards to the Office of Congressional Ethics. While, like many Americans, I could really use amending this conversation with a good cup of coffee. Let's take a look at what's really going on with the mainstream media, the Goodlatte Amendment, and the way the mainstream media is reporting on it. The Office of Congressional Ethics is an independent, nonpartisan office founded 8 years ago to review members and staff of the House of Representatives, and to serve as a receiving forum for complaints from members of the public. Coverage of this story in news media has been claiming that Republicans have been gutting the OCE. In fact, the same verbiage is oddly used across almost all mainstream news media outlets. Gutting ethics panel, gutting OCE, House GOP gutting ethics office, and by the way, these headlines have been changing quite a bit because this story has been evolving very quickly. Now, news coverage has been conspicuously leaving out the fact that the Office of Congressional Ethics, or the OCE, is not the only review for ethics within the House. There's also the House Committee on Ethics. Now, if that sounds confusing, that's because it is, and that's partly what the Goodlatte Amendment hoped to rectify. The Goodlatte Amendment proposes, in part, to move the OCE under the umbrella of the House Committee on Ethics. Going straight to the source, Goodlatte himself writes, "An amendment I offered builds upon and strengthens the existing OCE by maintaining its primary area of focus, accepting and reviewing complaints from the public, while providing additional due process rights for individuals under investigation, as well as witnesses called to testify." It also proposes the name change from the OCE to the Office of Congressional Complaint Review in order to draw a greater distinction between the OCE and the House Committee of Ethics. News networks pretending to be neutral are stating that the Republicans are gutting the House entirely of ethical review, without going into what the Goodlatte Amendment actually proposes. And worse, they link it to Trump, a conflation I'll address in just a moment. Let's start by getting to the source of this proposed amendment. According to Goodlatte, these provisions taken together ensure the rights of the accused are protected throughout the investigation and not subject to litigation by the media. Let's condense that and look at the important parts. This is concerned with ensuring the rights of the accused are protected and not subject to litigation by the media. Considering this amendment would restrict media access, are we really surprised that the media is throwing a fit about it? Of course not. This affects the media's ability to cover stories and investigations that could potentially be covered as juicy scandals, and that affects the media's bottom line. Now, while I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this information being available, it would be nice if the media acknowledged its bias here. The part of why they're lashing out against this move by the House Republicans is because it affects the media personally. Don't get me wrong, I want transparency within the government, but let's not pretend that mainstream media is perfectly transparent either, as evidenced by the way they're covering this story while refusing to disclose their bias. You can't pretend to be a neutral news source when you cover the news in this fashion. It's not hard to disclose a bias. For example, right now, my bias is to try to show the opposing point of view to what mainstream media would have you believe. That was pretty simple, wasn't it? Worse yet is the narrative to link this incident to Trump. Nancy Pelosi, of course, was one of the first to speak out, saying, "Republicans claim they want to drain the swamp, but the night before the new Congress gets sworn in, the House GOP has eliminated the only independent ethics oversight of their actions. Evidently, ethics are the first casualty of the new Republican Congress." It's emotionally charged, gripping language, but once again, it would be nice if we had some context for this quote, like the fact that Pelosi helped create the OCE. The OCE was created in 2008 at the prodding of Pelosi, then House Speaker, who had led a successful campaign to retake control of the chamber in part by pledging to drain the swamp of corruption on Capitol Hill. This is written directly on the House of Representatives website. Of course, Pelosi is outraged by this change because it's undermining her own pet project. Might have been good information to have when the public was trying to put this into context. This gets even worse when the media becomes involved, who've now linked this incident to Trump, proclaiming that his campaign promise to drain the swamp is now moot. But this conflation is dangerous. Aside from the pithy, although obvious point that this fact is called the Goodlatte Amendment and not the Trump Amendment, American Politics 101 is the separation of powers, or the three divisions of government. You have the legislative branch, which includes the Senate and the House of Representatives, which is what we're talking about here, the judicial branch, which has the Supreme Court and all the lower courts, and the executive, or in this case, President-elect Donald Trump. This bill is being discussed in the House, or the legislative branch. Confusing this with the executive branch is a misunderstanding of the most basic elements of American government, but it's a misunderstanding that the media is more than happy to perpetuate as long as it suits their narrative. Of course, the media didn't get away with it for very long. Within the last hour, Trump stepped up and tweeted, the beauty of the fast-moving pace of Twitter. And he stated, with all that Congress has to work on, do they really have to make the weakening of the independent ethics watchdog, as unfair as it may be, their #1 act and priority? Focus on tax reform, healthcare, and so many other things of far greater importance. #DrainTheSwamp. Right there, we saw the checks and balances that the media was happy to ignore, in effect. And in one fell swoop, Trump undermined a biased media narrative. It was pretty simple. He showed he didn't even agree with the focus on this amendment in the first place. Now, in the time that I was recording this video, it appears that the House has already started to back down on this amendment. But the question still stands, was the Goodlatte Amendment sound? I'd love to know what you think, but here's my thoughts on it. On one hand, I support due process and the core belief in this country that people are innocent until proven guilty. I generally feel that media involvement in hearings, whether they be hearings of everyday individuals or government members, tends to undermine the perception of an individual's right to be innocent until proven guilty, because the general public doesn't operate by the same standards that a court or an ethics committee does. And this is especially true when purposely harmful false complaints can be submitted to this committee in order to undermine the people being investigated, because the people submitting those complaints know that before the review comes to its natural conclusion, the media will cover it and the public will already jump to a conclusion on their own. So I can see why some people would be inclined to push for an amendment on the OCE. At the same time, I'm a huge proponent of transparency, and therefore I'm always leery when the government tries to reduce visibility of what it's doing to anybody, especially the media, which in many cases functions as an independent check on governmental power. However, that's what made me want to cover this story through the lens of, is the media handling the story properly? Because as you could see, the government is trying to take away what the media has visibility into, but it makes it harder to advocate for the media when they behave in a way that isn't necessarily neutral as they claim, which undermines their reliability and reputation. What do you think of the Goodlatte Amendment and everything that's transpired since, the way the media has covered it, Trump's response to it? What are your thoughts on this issue? Please share with me below. I look forward to reading them. Don't forget to like this video and share it, and subscribe for more interesting stories that are worth a second look.